Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today to watch me edit. I'd really like to hear from all of you, so if you could leave me some feedback on what you found most helpful, anything that I can do differently in the future that might explain things a little bit better, I would love if you could do that. So I'm going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Mary Hebert. I own a photography studio in Manchester, New Hampshire. I started doing photography in 1998, which dates me a little bit. And I took my first Photoshop class in 2001, so I've been doing this for quite a while now. I specialize in newborn, child, and family portraits, but I am an equal opportunity photographer, so if I get a call for a shoot, I pretty much always do it, regardless of what it is. I use Lightroom and Photoshop for my editing. Those are the two programs I'm going to be using today. They're both huge programs, and there's about 50 different ways to do anything in Photoshop and in Lightroom. So all I can show you is the way I do things. I'm not going to say it's the right way or the wrong way, but this is the way I do things. And there are a million other ways that you could accomplish similar things in Photoshop. So by no means is the way that I'm telling you how to do it the only way that there is to do it. But these are my preferred methods. So I had a lot of requests to edit this particular image because I extended the backdrop and people were kind of curious of how I did that. And I think you're going to be surprised that it's way easier than you think it is. So this is kind of the final image that we're going for, but this was my raw image straight out of camera, what I shot, what I brought home, what I edited. So the first thing I'm going to do in this image is we're working in Lightroom right now. Oh, let me see if I can, hold on one second. There we go. I just want to highlight my cursor a little bit more so it's a little bit easier for you guys to see. So the first thing I would do to this image is I'm going to crop it a little bit. This is actually kind of an optical illusion here because this is my backdrop light. It looks almost in this image like it's aimed at her. It's not. It's actually behind the moon. And it's aimed just at the backdrop, and that's what's causing this light here on the backdrop. My main light was on the camera left-hand side here, and I had a kicker light on this side, which was a softbox. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crop this image a little bit because even though I'm going to extend the backdrop, I don't want to lose the moon and all that stuff. There is a lot going on that I didn't really need going on in this backdrop. So we're going to move this around a little bit and make it a little bit more pleasing. All right. So now that it's cropped a little bit, I like it a little bit more. The next thing I would always do to an image is correct the white balance. In my studio, I pretty much know my white balance all the time, so I have a pretty good idea of what my settings are going to be, which is a luxury that not everyone has. But in this situation, what you could do is use this eyedropper tool right here, and you would just choose something in the background that was white or it was a neutral grayish color. I could click on this, but I know that my colors in my studio, the walls are pretty cream colored, so let's see what that gets us. That's pretty cold. I know that this white baseboard here was really white, so that is something that we could try. It helped a little bit. For the most part in my studio, I know that this would be about 5704-ish, in that the tint would be around -21. I just know it because that's my studio, and I know that that's usually the settings that I go with. I would increase the exposure in this image a tiny little bit, not a ton. Maybe even less, maybe about a +30. If you're not really familiar with Lightroom, it's set up kind of in a great way where you start at the top here, and it's meant for you to start here and work your way down. So all of the initial adjustments that you need are all right here. In this particular image, I'm not going to really do any of them. I'm not going to change anything except the exposure. And then one thing I do for all of my pictures is I'm going to add a little bit of luminance, which is noise reduction. Usually add about 14 or 15%. And then under lens correction, because I'm shooting in my studio, I'm usually shooting with a wide angle. You can see up here, this was shot at 46 millimeters. So it's technically wide angle, it's less than 50. So sometimes there is lens distortion. The way you can easily correct that is under lens correction, profile. You can choose enable profile corrections. That's gonna fix my lens distortion. And I'm also going to remove chromatic aberration. Even though I don't think there's any in this image, it's still worth clicking just because it's such an easy thing to do. Chromatic aberration is when you have two really high contrasting colors next to each other, and what happens is it's caused by the lens, but what happens is you get like a magenta line that like shows up like a halo around certain images. And that's chromatic aberration, and all you have to do is click that and it's gonna take it away. It's kind of like a magenta fringing that happens. So now that I'm at this point, I'm done in Lightroom. That's all I'm gonna do in Lightroom. So now I'm going to hit Command E because I'm on a Mac. It would be Control E if you were on a PC, and that is going to open my image in Photoshop. And hopefully that stops the blinking that's going on. I don't know why that's happening at the top of my screen. Maybe you guys can't see it. Hopefully you can't. All right, so we're in Photoshop. Let me get rid of some of this distraction over here. The first thing I'm gonna do right off the bat is I'm gonna fix this backdrop, because when I, excuse my email popping up, when I do my global edits to this entire image, I want it to look seamless with the backdrop. I don't want to have to try to edit the extended part to match the rest of it. So I'm going to take care of this right now. And this is kind of my own method that I use. I've kind of developed it over, sorry, I'm just trying to get this out of the way. I do use this a lot, so I don't want to get rid of it completely, but I don't want it to be distracting. This is the method I've come up with that I've used a million times. It's what I find is the best way to extend a backdrop in most cases. There's always scenarios where you can't use this method. And I actually have another tutorial that I did a while ago that I can try to share with you guys that is pretty much every way you can possibly extend a backdrop in Photoshop, because there's so many. But this is the way I'm going to do it for this image. So I'm going to go over here with my layer, and I'm going to hit Command J, Control J on a Mac, and that is going to duplicate my layer. So now I have two identical images sitting on top of each other that I can work with. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a layer mask out of the top image here, and you do that by choosing this little kind of rectangle with a circle in the middle. Creates a layer mask. What a layer mask does is it allows me to use my paintbrush to reveal or conceal the image below it. It's much, much better than using the eraser. I never use the eraser because it's permanent. With the layer mask, you know, I can paint something to reveal the image below, and if I don't like it, I can just paint it back and it just goes back. So it's just much easier. So anyways, the next thing I'm going to do is make sure I'm clicked on this white layer mask here. I am going to choose, if you hit B, that's brush. It's going to choose a brush for you. If you use the bracket keys, you can make that brush smaller or bigger. That's a huge time saver. Let's see. I'm going to make sure my opacity up here is at 100%. And that I am choosing the black brush here. And I am going to take that and I'm going to paint all over here. And now it's not going to look like I'm doing anything because it's revealing the image below it, which is an identical image to the one on top of it. So of course it's not going to look any different. So now I'm going to go to that bottom image. I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to go up here and choose my move tool, and I'm going to move the backdrop to an area where I think it works the best. For me, that's about right there. And I can go back to my layer and back to my black brush and make it small and kind of correct. Oops. I don't know why it's being... If you ever need to go back in Photoshop, Command Z takes you back. Command Control Z continues to take you back. So if you need to go back like 5 steps, just hold or Command Option Z, and that is going to continue to take you back. It's really, really helpful. So, okay, I was on my move tool and not the brush tool. So now I'm back on the brush tool. I'm going to make it smaller here, and I'm going to clean up some of these stars. And I'm going to fix them in a little bit, and I'm going to show you how I did that. All right, so that looks pretty good. The next thing, you know, I got a little bit of lines in here I'm going to fix. Okay. The next thing I would do in this situation is I would flatten my image, which some people keep all of their layers open. I am not one of those people. I flatten my images all the time. I'm probably not doing it the best way. I'm sure it's better to keep all of your layers so that you can access them again, but I don't generally need to, so I just don't. This is a situation where this little line is here where you could use the clone tool. So I would go up here and grab the clone tool, make it a little bit bigger, make sure my opacity is at 100% and flows at 100%. I would choose really anywhere around here, and I would just clone that little strip out of the way. So that's that. Now I'm gonna fix these stars up here, because obviously this looks kind of weird. It doesn't match the other side of the drop at all. What I want to do is I want to kind of make a random pattern, and this isn't going to be an exact replica of the last edit I did, because I don't remember exactly what I did for that edit, but it's going to be pretty close. What I would do for this one is I would take my clone stamp, make it a little bit smaller, and I would hold the Option key and choose this star right here. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to find a place that I feel like that star is going to look kind of randomly placed and correct, if you will. So I kind of like it right here. I make my clone stamp a little bigger. I'm going to hold down my left mouse key, and I'm just going to drag it up and clone that star right over here. So now I have a little bit of variety. In the background's looking pretty good. There's a little bit of patterns in here that you can see, and I think I left them in the original. If the patterns bothered you, which I feel like this is a patterned backdrop, so it doesn't bother me, but if it did, you could just select an area to clone kind of around so that it looked a little bit less perfect. All right, so now we're going to do the other side, and this is going to be super easy because we just did all of this work here. So I am going to Command J to duplicate my layer the same way I did before, except this time I'm going to take the background, unlock it. I'm going to hit Command T. That enables you to transform the image. Well, you can see transform is activated because it's got these little indicators all the way around. While that's on, I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose flip horizontal. You're not going to see it because the image that it's showing is the top image, and I'm working on the bottom image here. So once I've flipped it horizontal, I'm going to hit enter because that's going to take away the transform action. We're going to go back to the top layer. We're going to choose this down here, this little mask button, to make it a mask. We're going to make sure we're on our black brush and it's 100% flow, 100% opacity, and we are, oops, I'm still on the clone stamp. All right, so now we're on a black brush, 100%, 100%. We are going to paint the other side of the image onto this side of the image. I'm going to adjust my brush size a little bit here. I want to keep some of these shadows down here because the moon would have shadows. I just want to make sure that up here is kind of blended the way it should be. That looks pretty good. You can see a little bit of the moon is showing up from the cloned image. So I'm going to go back to the white brush and I'm going to paint that off so that won't be a factor. And you can even play with this shadow a little bit more if it, you know, it was bothering you. If you wanted to make that shadow fade a little bit more, you could drop your opacity of the brush to like 50%. And you do that just by hitting the 5 key. And then you could kind of lightly paint so it's not quite as strong. And then you still have a shadow, but it looks a little bit more seamless. Okay, so I'm happy with that backdrop. I bet you're shocked that it was that easy. It really is that easy. I'm going to flatten this image at this point. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom into her face. I do that by hitting Command+. Isn't she cute? She's my neighbor's little girl. She's adorable. And she's got a little drool here. Other than that, she's pretty close to perfect. But I'm going to go up here to my clone or my healing brush tool. I almost always use the healing brush tool. Some people really like the patch tool. For me, this works better. You hit Option and you're going to sample from an area of good skin and you're just going to paint over some of those imperfections that you see. And the key to doing a good job with this, even those little red spots, is to constantly be re-selecting an area that you're working from so that you don't end up with a lot of patterns. And if you zoom really far in, you can see right around her mouth, there's a little bit of drool. This is pretty common with kiddos. They're teething. So I'm gonna just take some of that out and make the skin a little bit more even around her mouth. Like I said, just keep selecting from new areas. Just got a little spot there. These could be freckles. I mean, you don't have to remove them if you don't feel like they're a big deal. And take this little one out. All right, look at that little dot in her hair. Let's get that too. And zoom back out here. And nothing else is really jumping out at me that needs to be fixed. There is, you know what? This moon does have a little blemish on it. Actually, you can see one there too. You could use the same healing tool to select a spot and just get rid of that. If you're new to using the healing tool, you should Command J and duplicate your image before you start. That way, if you need to go back and fix anything, you have the image you started with right below it. You can see with the healing brush tool, sometimes when you get close to an area where the color is going to change, you get some kind of funky lightning and stuff going on. That's when I would use the clone tool for this area right here, because I want this to be, you know, an exact copy. You just got to make sure that you're lining it up perfect because you don't want a wobbly looking moon. I'm not going to go into crazy detail fixing this thing up. I just want to show you how I would do a lot of this stuff. Okay. And I'm still seeing like a weird little splotch of lightness. Let's go a little bigger right here. So I'm going to fix that real quick. Okay, zooming back out. I'm pretty happy with that. That looks pretty good. The next thing I'm going to do is my, what I call global adjustments. I'm going to adjust the different properties of my entire image. And I am a huge fan of layers. Layers and curves work very similar. Some people love curves. Some people love layers. I happen to be a layer person. That's what I prefer to do because I like histograms. Histograms are your friend, especially if you're not working on a calibrated computer, which you should be. It should be calibrated monthly. You really, it's hard for you to really judge the brightness and colors on your image without looking at a histogram, because you might not be seeing the accurate picture of what it really looks like, but your histogram is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a levels layer. Oh my goodness, these emails, you'd think I was so popular. Hold on, I think I can just, let's quit that and maybe they'll stop showing up. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a levels layer, and I'm going to do that by going down to this little circle with a squiggly line through it. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to choose levels. And you're going to see it immediately gives me a histogram of my global picture, what this entire picture looks like. In a histogram, here is your darks, and here is your lights, and here is your midtones. Midtones, it doesn't really matter if they're peaking all the way up to the sky, if they're a tiny little bump, it really doesn't matter. It's all your preference. What you really want to pay attention to is here and here. And you can see that there's a huge gap here between my highlights. So what it's telling me is the lights in my picture is not even close to being as light as they should be. My darks are pretty accurate. Sometimes I bump them up 1 or 2. And so I need to pull my highlights way up. And I do that just by moving towards the end. I don't like to go all the way to the end with highlights because I'm going to do some additional levels work on her skin and I'm going to increase the highlights there. So I like to leave a little bit of a gap on my global adjustments. And then the midtones are really, you're going to adjust them to your preference, whatever you think looks the best. I mean, the default setting actually looked pretty good. I don't really have to change that. Just a quick tip, if you ever want to create like a matte finish on your picture, you can go down here to the output levels and just change those, and that's going to create like a matte finish. I never do that. I'm just not a matte person, but if you are a matte person, that's a great way to do it. So I'm going to toggle this on and off. So this was before, this is now. It's already looking better. I'm going to flatten this again. And now I'm going to show you something really cool. You have to make sure you're on your brush tool. You have to make sure it's at 100%. I believe it has to be on black. Let's see. I might be lying. I want you to hit the Q key, and you'll see this just became green. I've changed the color to green because that was something someone else taught me. I think the default color is red, but I have changed mine to green. I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to paint it just on her skin. This is called the quick mask mode. Because the next thing I'm going to do, I really only want to affect her skin. It might get a little bit on her dress. That's okay. I'm not really clean about these. If you flip it back to the white, you can paint it off her dress if you really want to. Okay, here's the important thing. You have to hit the Q button again. And now you're going to see these little marching ants around what I just masked. Don't worry if there's some spots that aren't inside the mask, because this is a pretty forgiving mask. It's not exact, so it's gonna kind of go a little bit outside of the line, so I'm not really worried about that. Now that I have my marching ants, I'm gonna go back down here and I'm gonna create another levels layer. And how awesome is this? I now have a histogram that shows me the exact lights and darks of just her skin. So when I manipulate this histogram, I'm only manipulating her skin. So even in the last one, when we fixed the global highlights and it said we were pretty good, once we look at just her skin, you can see there's a huge gap again. So now I know there's a lot of contrast that is missing from just her skin. So I'm going to move this way closer to my mound here. You can add a little darks if you want to. I might go there, and then I always kind of check my midtones to see if there's something I would like. I like it a little bit softer, so that kind of looks nice. So I'm going to toggle on and off. Look at how different that is. Usually when skin is not looking good, it's because it's missing contrast. That is a huge thing. Contrast is what draws our eyes to a picture. So if your images are looking really flat, they're probably really low in contrast. So her skin looks way better. The other thing I'm going to do real quick is where it says normal right here, this is your blending mode. I'm going to drop that down and I'm going to choose luminosity. And you'll see that her skin just took out some red. Using a regular layer or level as a layer does kind of push your reds a little bit. I'll show you one more time. Normal and luminosity. Luminosity is always what I use for skin because it just doesn't have that extra added redness into it. Now that I'm happy with that, I'm going to flatten this image. And let's see, we could come in here, and the next thing we'll do is add some sparkle to her eyes. Actually, you know what, the next thing we're gonna do is sharpen the image. And I have to look at my book here real quick because I have all of these things saved as actions. So I don't actually do any of them. I do hand edit a lot, but because it saves me so much time, I do save most of my own work as actions so that I can go back and I don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel every time I use a specific action. Let's see. If I can't find this really quick, I'm just going to kind of make it up because I'm pretty sure I could do it anyways. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the layer here. I'm going to hit Command J to copy. I'm going to go to Filter, Other, and I'm going to choose Highpass. I'm going to put the radius at 6.6. That's where I always keep it 100% of the time. Some people go all the way up to 10. I always keep it at 6.6. I hit OK. And I'm going to change my blending mode to lighten. Oh, just kidding. That looks terrible. Let's try overlay. There we go. You change it to overlay. Okay, so I would save this as an action so I would never have to do it again. So when I toggle this on and off, look at how over sharpened that is. I don't want it that crazy sharpened. So I'm going to lower my opacity, and that's what I end up doing for every image. You know, I play it at this high end of sharpening and then I kind of move it down. But look at the difference in sharpness between those two images. If you wanted to, you could create a layer out of this and paint it off some of the skin. I'm going to use Portraiture in a few minutes, and that's going to take care of any sharpening issues that I have, so I'm not too worried about that. But one more time, look at how awesome that looks. So if you need to sharpen an image, that's the way to sharpen it. All right, we're going to flatten that. Next, we're going to do a little bit of dodge and burning to her eyes to make them pop out a little bit more. And the way I'm going to do that is to start with a blank layer. To start with a blank layer, it's this little piece of paper with the corner folded over. So you go there. I'm going to go to Edit, Fill. I'm going to fill it. Let's see. Oh wait, I saw it. 50% gray. And I'm going to change it. Let's see. I think that's all good. I can go okay. Yeah, looks good, right? And I'm going to change the blending layer to overlay once again. Oops. Normal to overlay. Again, I have these all saved as actions, so I don't always pay attention to exactly what I'm doing. And now I'm going to, I believe, let me see, did I invert it before? We'll see how this works. Ideally, your black brush will dodge and burn your blacks, and your white brush will dodge and burn your whites, or dodge your whites and burn your blacks. The thing is, you don't want to use this at full capacity. Look at that, that looks crazy. Command Z. So you want your opacity to be at 10%. And the easiest shortcut for that is you hit number 1 on your keyboard and you're now at 10%. You can see it dropped it right there. So I'm going to do my black brush first, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to trace over some of the black areas that I want to add a little bit of contrast to. Maybe your eyelashes, maybe this stuff out here. Around this area. I even like to hit the pupil a little bit. And you know what, to be honest, it doesn't look like it's doing a whole lot, but believe it or not, it is. Now I'm going to switch to my white brush, and I'm going to use my white brush, and I like to kind of click really fast and do all these little tiny dots, but I'm going to use those to increase the lighter part of her eyes. So now let's toggle that on and off. Look at that difference. That's huge, right? So now I'm gonna zoom out a little. I don't want her to look crazy. She kind of looks crazy. So now I'm gonna lower the opacity of this until I feel like it's at a place I like it. That looks pretty good to me. Brings out some of those blues. Okay. Next I'm gonna do a soft light layer for my background because I really like the contrast that it brings to the background. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to do another levels layer, and we're going to change the blending mode to soft light, and it's going to look crazy, right? So we're going to drop the opacity to about 15%. It's where my happy place usually is, right around 15. And when I toggle it on and off, you can see it adds a lot of kind of cool contrast to that backdrop. The thing that I don't like is what it does to skin. So I'm going to choose my black brush, put it back at 100% by hitting the 0. This little circle guide thing kind of throws me off here. And I'm going to paint it off my skin because it kind of increases your reds a lot, and I don't like that in my skin. So I'll take that off. And now we can toggle on, toggle off. Looks pretty good. I like it. Sometimes you can make your darks a little bit too dark. You could always click on this histogram right here and kind of see where they're at. I don't think we don't have any black clipping going on, so we're pretty good here. I'm going to flatten that. The next thing I want to do is I want to lighten and darken some of this backdrop. And I'm going to use good old levels. That's what I do. I'm going to choose a levels layer. I'm going to make it, we'll start with dark. I'm going to make it really dark. Pull these down. And then I'm going to hit Command I, and that's going to invert my layer. So now what I made really dark is hidden, and if I want to reveal it, I just need to use the white brush. So I'm going to use the white brush, make it kind of big at about 50%, and I'm just going to go around and kind of darken some of the areas that I want darker. I like my focus to be on my subject. And your eye is drawn to the lightest thing in the picture. So that looks a little bit better. I'm actually going to change my opacity to 20%. The top of this moon is a little bit bright for me. So I'm going to take that down a notch. And I'm just going to keep painting until it looks where I want it to be. Better? Much better, right? Flatten it. Next thing I'm going to do is the exact same thing, except I'm going to just do my highlights this time. I'm going to turn my highlights way up, like crazy high, and I'm going to turn my midtones crazy high. I don't like the midtones that high, but definitely my highlights really high, and I can even add some blacks in there. Look at how awful she looks. Okay, Command I, we're going to invert that. I'm going to choose my white brush. It's at 20% right now. I might bump it up to 40%. Just hit the 4. I'm going to use this little circle thing. Let's get rid of that for now because it's just not even keeping up anymore. I'm going to go and I'm going to hit some of these stars so that they kind of look like they're glowing. This is something fun I kind of do with my Christmas minis. Even these little ones in the background, I might hit some of those just to bring out some of the glowiness of them. Let's see how we look. Cool? Looks much brighter. You could even go to like 80% on your brush and hit them even brighter if you wanted to. Make them really stand out. That's fine. I mean, you know, whatever you like. That looks fine to me. Actually, you know what? Let's tone down those stars a tiny bit. Maybe a little bit less than that. Maybe we'll go up a little. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is portraiture. I'm not really going in any specific order here. I'm just kind of going around doing what I would do if I was editing this. If you don't have portraiture, it's an awesome plugin. It makes skin editing so easy and it's so worth the money. And if you want to email me, you can, and I believe I can get you a discount code for portraiture, but I won't make any promises, but I believe I can. But I'm going to show you how I use it. I'm going to hit Command J because I want to add this filter to a layer without touching my background copy. I'm going to go to Filter, down here. I never know how to pronounce this correctly. Is it imagenic? Imagenic? I have no idea. They make Noiseware and Portraiture. I have both. I'm going to choose Portraiture. And you can actually take like a screenshot of my settings. These are the settings I've had on Portraiture for like 2.5 years. I love Portraiture. I use it all the time. These settings work amazing for me, whether I'm working with a family, a newborn, whatever I'm doing, these never change. So all I'm going to hit is OK. Now it's going to affect my entire image, which I don't want because I don't really need skin smoothing to all my backdrop and all that stuff. So I'm going to make this a layer mask by hitting the square with the circle in it. And I'm going to hit Command I to invert it. And now I'm going to sneak in here very close with my brush, my white brush. And it's at 80%. I'm going to put it at 100%. And I'm going to use Portraiture to smooth out her skin. One of the settings I do have in Portraiture does take a little bit of redness out as well, which is kind of handy to have. Just in case there's a little tiny bit of a red tint in someone's skin, it'll help take it out. She's pretty fair. I mean, she's got some red reflecting from this dress, but it's nothing crazy. Okay, so this is what a plastic person looks like. I'm going to toggle it on and off. Off, on. That's how you make someone plastic. I don't want to make a plastic person, so I'm going to lower my opacity. I usually lower it to about 30% for kids. So it almost doesn't even look like it did anything, but if I zoom in here, I can toggle it on, toggle it off. You can see it's making the skin much softer. I'm going to flatten that, move out here. The last thing I'm going to do to this image before I call it a day, actually I'm going to do two more things. One thing I'm going to do is I guess you could call it dodge and burn their faces a little bit. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I'm going to do it the exact same way that I did the background. I'm going to create a level, not a curves, sorry. I'm going to create a levels layer. I'm going to start with my darks, so I'm going to increase the darks. And the only difference is because I'm working on skin and shadows, I'm going to change it to luminosity. And then I'm going to hit Control I to invert it. I'm going to come up here close with a white brush, small brush at 20%. So I'm going to hit the 2. I am going to go around and darken. I know it seems kind of silly, and I might even hit 30% on this one because you're not seeing a whole lot of different. Yeah, you know what, let's do 50%. Let's go crazy. I darken some of the areas that would be dark anyways. Like I just it adds contrast. I'm adding a little bit of contrast even into her dress. I can kind of add some contrast into these ruffles to make them look a little bit more, just more prominent. But mostly I do it on the sides of the face, under the chin, and now I'm going to toggle on and off to show you this is what it looks like before, this is what it looks like now. It's not a huge difference. I'm going to leave that layer open for a second because I'm going to show you the next layer I'm going to do. Next, I'm going to do a levels layer, and I'm going to do the highlights again. I don't want to clip highlights, but that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit, change this blend mode to luminosity. Don't forget that. Command I to invert it again. Choose a white brush. Mine's at 50% right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the spots on her face that would normally be hit by the sun or any kind of light source. You won't notice a ton of difference, but you can see that teeny tiny little brightness and then the teeny tiny little shadows I added. So now when we move out, we got the shadows around her face with the brightness in the middle. Helps make her look a little bit more prominent. I might lower the shadows a little bit. Okay, I'm happy with that. The only thing that I would be left with in this image that I'm not like crazy about is these stars in the background are crooked. That kind of drives me nuts. And I think in the image that I showed you guys, it was the same deal where they were kind of crooked. I didn't fix it last time. But it's a little annoying to me. The way I would fix that is I would Command J, because we always want to keep a copy of our original image. Go up here to Filter, and we're going to go to Liquify. And up here is called the Nudge tool. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to use the Nudge tool to straighten some of these stars. And as you can see, it's pulling this away, so I'm going to kind of pull it back here. Make it smaller. You want to make little tiny changes with the Liquify tool. If you make too big of a changes, you're going to see a lot of lens distortion or pixel destruction. Some people I've seen in the past have suggested extending backdrops using this. I think that's a really bad idea because it really does damage your pixels. You literally are stretching pixels to cover other pieces of your image. So when you do that, you're dropping the overall quality of your image quite a bit, and you're creating an image that probably can't be printed pretty big. And of course we all want to print our images big, who wouldn't? So let's look at how this looks here. That looks better. It's still not perfect. We still got some crooked stuff here. But that's just a little OCD kicking in. You might even like the way that it looked bent. I don't know. So it's all personal preference of what you like and what you don't like. But this is exactly how I would fix this. All right, I'm gonna hit OK. So there you go. Before, after. Looks much better. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna flatten this image and I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna do that by hitting Command S. That saves my image. Control S if you're on a PC. And Command Q, which is gonna quit Photoshop, and it's gonna pop me back into Lightroom. So this is our finished image. It's pretty similar to the one I showed you before, a little bit different. This is where we started. This is where we ended. It looks a whole lot better. It looks, you know, like a finished product. And so that is exactly how I would edit this image. If you have any questions for me, I would really, really love some feedback on this tutorial. I'd love to know if there's anything else that you really want to learn, if there's any way you think I could have explained things better, anything I could do differently. I really am passionate about teaching. I want to teach beginner photographers, and I'm hoping to start some regular classes. So please let me know your feedback. I would love to hear from it, whether you comment on the YouTube video or comment on the Facebook post that I initially posted this on. Either one would be helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching. You're awesome. And I will keep you updated on when the next tutorial will be up. I hope you guys have an awesome Friday. Enjoy your night.